I was so excited to get my shipment from Last Bottle Wines in the mail the other day, full of incredible red wines, all from Napa Valley. I love wine tasting, so having this to my door couldn't be happier. Also, couldn't be more excited that today's episode is brought to you by Last Bottle Wines. If you don't know already, they're a Napa-based online wine shop with a twist. They offer just one handpicked wine per day until it sells out, and they're always at incredible prices. We're talking 30 to 70% off retail. And the best part is that there's no subscriptions, no fees, and no minimum purchase. And I could not be more excited to bring this offer right now because they're having a marathon sale, which is coming up March 28th and 29th. Even better, we're offering Dateable listeners 10% off your first order with code Dateable. So if you are a wine lover like me, this is a great time to join. And did I mention that shipping is 100% free? So what are you waiting for? Mark your calendar for March 28th and 29th, or get on it earlier if you want. You can sign up at lastbottlewines.com and use code Dateable and find out why Last Bottle is the most fun way to discover and buy amazing wine. We are so thrilled to be partnering with Hinge. Hinge is the dating app designed to be deleted. As you all know, I'm a huge Hinge advocate as I met my partner of almost 3 years on the app. Even before meeting him, Hinge was always my go-to app because I met more relationship-minded people here and had some great dates. Clearly, I haven't been on the app for a little while, but I re-downloaded it to check out some of the new features. One that stood out to me was the voice prompt, my best friend's take on why you should date me, where your friend can hype you up. Not only does this make the profile creation less daunting, but it's not always easy to see your own green flags. So to test it out, I asked Yue some fun prompts to get her take on what I could put if I was dating again. So the first one, how long have we known each other? What was your first impression of me and how has that changed?
Julie and I have known each other for almost 10 years. My first impression of Julie was that she's very social, but I've learned that she has a lot more depth to her beyond the social butterfly that she is.
My next prompt, what do you think are my green flags?
I would say she's deeply loyal. She believes in love, curious mindset, and she is fearlessly ambitious.
And then last but not least, what kind of friend am I?
Julie is the kind of friend who will always have your back, no matter what.
Damn, that feels nice to hear. So download Hinge and try voice prompts today. Then find someone worth deleting the app for.
The Dateable podcast is an insider's look into modern dating that the Huffington Post calls one of the top 10 podcasts about love and sex. On each episode, we'll talk to real daters about everything from sex parties to sex droughts, date fails to diaper fetishes, and first moves to first loves. I'm your host, Yue Xu, former dating coach turned dating sociologist. You'll also hear from my co-host and producer, Julie Krafchick, as we explore this crazy dateable world. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dateable, a show all about modern dating, where we want to get to the bottom of why people do the things that they do. And we try to do this on every episode, which is the motive for our entire podcast. Figuring out people's behaviors.
Yes, we had a great event this week all about dating profiles. And I feel like I've never thought about dating profiles this much.
I had like one sentence about me's and
Ed. Me too. I was going to say, I really appreciate how mindful people are about their profiles. And I loved like all the things that we learned in the session.
Yeah, we had two great experts, Marie Tuin and Nitya Preslaki, who is a photographer, and they tag teamed on helping people to make their dating profiles better, but also step back and ask yourself, like, why am I even on dating apps in the first place?
Yeah, I feel like there were definitely some good photo tips that I need to apply. I'm like the worst at photos. I cannot keep my eyes open in them. I have like a serious blinking problem. And I asked an anonymous question, put in air quotes, of like, how can you not close your eyes, but not be like super bug-eyed either? Because I've definitely swung the opposite side of the pendulum, and that does not look good in photos either.
It's hard to keep your eyes open when you're focusing on like your body. You're focusing like, where should I put my hands?
Right.
How should I pose? Where should I stand? And then you're like, fuck, now now I have to think about keeping my eyes open at the same time. Too much to balance.
I think it's also like when you're doing selfies, like I feel like it's a little easier when someone's doing it, but it's like when you're doing a selfie, it's like you gotta control it.
Yeah.
You gotta keep your eye. It's like too much at once. That just doesn't turn out good.
But I thought it was Vance said do burst mode. I think that's a really great tip. It's just take 1,000 pictures at once. One of them is bound to be good with your eyes open.
Yeah, but it was really fun. I liked the critiquing of people's profiles, and I feel like our 3 people that did it are going to have some really good results. They got very actionable things to change. That was good.
And they already had good profiles to begin with.
Right.
It's just going to make them even more stellar. But
I feel like we had such a good reception to last week's episode, also all about dating profiles with Dawoon King from Coffee Meets Bagel. And I'll just give Diana Nemeth, hopefully I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, shout out because she actually used my tip of going on photofeeler.com, that one that actually rates them. And she did confirm that you will get sucked into spending at least $30. That is exactly verbatim what I said. It's like they get you with like, oh, you only need like $5 to start. Yep.
And then that's how they get you. But we need to get out of our heads and get other people's opinions, because sometimes have you stared at your photos so long that you have no idea how you can even judge if it's a good photo anymore?
Right.
Really need other people's opinions. It makes sense to do so. That was a good episode.
It was. But we have quite the episode in store this week. We have Brian Clark, who is our Most Dateable winner. Woo! So you all probably remember the Most Dateable contest. What was that, in February we did it?
Yeah, right around Valentine's Day.
Right. This was like such a high production value for Zoom events. Louise, our events producer, just like totally killed it with this. And Yue, I give you major credit too that you organized the talent, and everyone just blew us away from this. But there could only be one Most Dateable, and that was Brian Clark. And of course we were like, we got to get you on a podcast episode. He really showed us his V card, his vulnerability card. We're like tossing around naming the episode that, and then we're like, no, people are totally gonna think it's like virginity card.
Too confusing. Yeah.
Too confusing. But I love the show. I think we need a t-shirt that says show us your V card. That's a great name. But Brian really showed us his V card at the Most Dateable contest, and we wanted to go deeper in his story. He talks all about just like his own personal journey, you know, like going through therapy and really like learning how to be more vulnerable and not just like, you know, bottle up feelings.
And we talk about this on our show about therapy quite a bit, and we talk about when you should try therapy. And it's not so much that you are experiencing a problem or you're at a crossroads in your life or something devastating is happening and you go into therapy. In this episode, you'll see that therapy is sort of like this muscle that you just have to work all the time. You don't go to the gym the minute you eat a hamburger. You work out just to maintain your health. The same thing with therapy. You do this to maintain your mental health. And in honor of National Mental Health Awareness Month, as we said before, also National AAPI Heritage Month, and also National Masturbation Month, all the 3 things that are so important. It is important for us to recognize that we are huge proponents of therapy. We think it is important for everybody, no matter where you are in life, what you're going through. Even if you don't think you have problems, trust me, we all have problems from our childhood. Yes. It goes all the way back. And it takes a professional to help us unravel and undo all the things that were said to us, done to us, that we were exposed to as a child.
I saw the funniest video on TikTok that was like,
here we go. We need to give you your own segment. Julie on TikTok. Julie's findings on TikTok.
100% a lurker, not a contributor. But it was like, what is the 4 words that you want every man to say? And of course, this could be interchanged for any gender, but it was, I have a therapist.
The sexiest words to ever come out of someone's mouth. But we got to normalize therapy. It's no longer a thing for crazy people. Everybody is crazy. There's no such thing as normal. We are all crazy to some extent. And it's good just to get a professional to help us exercise those mental health muscles.
Yue, I'm curious, like, what are some of your experiences with, doesn't have to be therapy per se, but like, have you had those moments that you did some like the internal work and it changed like dating for you?
I think everything. I've done a lot of couples counseling that I've talked about
Right,
quite a
right.
bit
Group
on this.
therapy.
Group therapy. And I went into therapy thinking it's going to solve my issues. And I came out of therapy knowing that I have the tools to solve my own issues as opposed to looking for someone else to do it. And I think what therapy has really done for me, especially group therapy, is to highlight that everyone has issues and there are no issues that are too big or too small. Your truth is your truth. Whatever your issue is that you're going through right now, it's hindering your ability to fully love someone or to find love. That is a big issue, whether on the grand scheme of things is like big or small. So I personally just believe therapy has just helped me find more clarity.
Totally. That's such an interesting point because I feel like sometimes you're like, oh, my love life, like that doesn't deserve therapy. But like it does deserve therapy because it's, affecting you. I mean, I definitely turned to therapy after a breakup for sure. Like I actually think I can think of like two pivotal moments for me in my like dating life. Like one of them was when I just was frustrated by dating. Like it was like after I was like serial dating all the time and nothing was going anywhere. And I actually didn't turn to therapy. I turned to Marty Batista, one of our past guests, but it was kind of therapy. Like it was like really working out like your limiting beliefs and what was holding you back from dating. And I think that's why like I'm so like bullish about like our like, like the sounding board audio we do, because I do believe that stuff really can help you. And it definitely changed my mindset. And that's like when I met my like most serious ex, like right after that. I mean, it wasn't my ex at the time, but boyfriend after that, like kind of work, right? And then I went to therapy after we broke up the first time. I mean, there's stats, I think, that like going after a breakup is a pretty common thing. And, like I started with BetterHelp, actually, our sponsor.
Use our code.
But I remember that was kind of like my gateway to therapy, and it was really great, but it was definitely like around the realm of him. Like that was the focus. It was less about me. And then I feel like I transitioned to in-person therapy, and then it started to break down like me. Like every time I would talk about him, she would kind of turn it back on me. And I thought that was like really great way to kind of go deeper on it. And I think honestly, it changed me. I think I'm glad like that breakup was brutal, but I'm glad it brought me to therapy because I think it changed me and made me much more introspective and take ownership, I think, for my feelings. Like, I think that was a big piece of it. Like, I think I just distracted myself a lot, like in the past, like with external stuff. And I didn't really like even take the time to sit with my own emotions. So I think it really helped with that. And I think it made me a stronger person overall.
Helps you articulate your story,
yes,
right? I feel like that's
yes.
what therapy kind of forces you to do, is to talk about it out loud versus the other types of therapy that the media loves to portray, like retail therapy, food therapy. Those are distractions because you're not confronting your own emotions. But I agree. I think just putting it out there and using your own words to describe what you're going through sometimes is just very therapeutic in itself.
I mean, I personally believe this wholeheartedly, and probably anyone that's been listening to this podcast can see that you and I are both stand for this, but it's like, I definitely think there are some external things that you can do to present yourself in a better light, whether that's, better dating profile or makeover, whatever that may be. But I do really firmly believe that it's like the inside work that makes people dateable. Like, I think a lot of times, I think when I was like I mentioned, having those times where things weren't really progressing, it was because I hadn't done that work yet. Like, I think that is and that's like when I think separates the people that are like blaming the apps, blaming their city versus like taking accountability.
Yeah. And you have to realize therapy is not a Band-Aid effect. No. It's not like, oh, I'm going through a breakup, go to therapy. Oh, I'm not getting the matches I want, go to therapy. It's this muscle we constantly have to work. And I think going to therapy on a regular basis, especially when things are going well, is probably better than going when things are really bad.
Absolutely. And for anyone that really wants to dig into this topic, we've covered, I mean, we talk about therapy, we kind of hit it in a lot of episodes, but we have a few that are really dedicated to mental health. We have dating and mental health. That was like a big one. Yeah. That's the most obvious.
Can you guess
title.
What that one's about?
Yeah. What could that possibly be about? But we had a really great episode. I think it was season 7. So it's a little bit in the archives, but you can search on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever you're using, or our website. You can always go to dateablepodcast.com. But also we had Dating with Depression with Tony. That was last season. That was a really great episode. I know a lot of people said like, this really helped me because I feel like I have bouts of depression, or I've dated a partner with experiencing depression. And I mean, I've definitely experienced this too. And it can be like one of the hardest things on a relationship. So hearing other people's stories and reflecting is always important, whether you are the person that's going through it or the one that with someone that's going through it.
Yeah, we're very much looking forward for you all to hear Brian's story. And the story doesn't end with this episode. We're all on this journey and the journey never stops. So we get to hear him in the middle of his journey and where he's headed. It's absolutely fascinating and insightful. And that brings me to our question. Can we do our question?
Let's do it. Our nude segment.
Going into dating advice, here's a question we always get asked, and now we finally get to answer it. What are the top 3 topics you should not discuss on a date? Top 3 topics.
Juicy.
I can think of, yes, very juicy, or things that the juicy things that you should not be discussing on dates. Here's one I think is an absolute no-no, is talking negatively about your ex. It's just a no-no. Just don't do it. Don't do it. You can talk about your previous relationships, talk about them in a positive light, how much you've learned from them, how much you've grown from them, and leave it at that. You don't need to bring in what a bitch she was, what an asshole he was, how it just left you in the dust, and how it broke you. There's no need. On a date, keep it light, keep it positive.
I learned way too much about a past relationship, and I'm like, I'm never gonna see you again. I should not know any of this about you.
You're like,
I was like, sex life, money problems. I'm like, I do not need to know this. Like, no, save that for your therapist. Like, that should not be me that's hearing that, you know?
Here's an episode of Dateable you should just listen to.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's like another thing is like, don't want to be a therapist on a date. Like, there's definitely a thin line of sharing like past traumas. But I think when it goes like, especially in early dates, like the goal of early dates is to have fun and to like create new memories with this person. And I think when you're so fixated on the past, it's really hard to do that. So I think you should get vulnerable in the sense of like fears or stuff that's like, you know, going to affect the current day or even like from your childhood. I think there's a time and a place, but I do think there is the line of having a conversation versus like being a venting session. And that is a no-no on a date. No one wants to be your therapist on a date, or we're going to start charging $250 an hour for that.
Or more. Or more. 1 Bitcoin. Whatever. Just whatever you have in your wallet.
Just send the bill, Venmo, your like therapy bill. I think the one though that people do a lot that I think irks me is complaining about the dating apps.
Oh, yes.
I don't want to go on a date to hear you complain about dating app. The negativity is draining. Like, I think at the end of the day, you have to think about like, how do you want to feel in a relationship? Do you want to feel drained? Do you want to feel like happy? And, you know, like what feeling are you trying to get out of this? And if you're doing the opposite feeling, it's going to be really hard to find a partner because you're bringing that energy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it sets a weird mood for the date because more likely than not, you probably met on a dating app. And here's this person complaining about the very resource that brought you two together. So how are you supposed to feel in that moment? Can't feel very good. And it's just the overall theme of all 3 of these is just negativity. Don't bring in the negativity. Keep it fun. Keep it positive. We all want to date someone who's positive. We're not trying to be miserable with someone else who's feeling miserable at the same time. We want someone to uplift us and we want to uplift each other. So just keep that theme in mind. It's just anything negative, throw it out the door when it comes to dating. But it's probably a surprise for some of you because according to those old dating books, the 3 topics you shouldn't talk about on dates are like religion, politics, sex. Yeah.
I think you should talk about all of those. I think they're a good thing. I mean, like I think all of this too, we don't believe in hard, fast rules. So I don't want to to say like you have to be positive 100% of the time, but I think there is something about the early stages of dating and then the context of the negativity. Like, is it that you're helping the partner once you've established that trust, or is it just a venting session?
Yeah.
That's the distinction.
And if you do, I agree, Julie, you don't have to be positive, like happy-go-lucky the entire date, but you can be really authentic. Say, I had a really hard time with the dating apps. It was really frustrating. But hey, it brought us together.
Exactly.
And I'm very grateful for the dating apps because we are here together. You know, like show that transformation.
Right. It's like going back to Corey's episode, right? All about how you went, the storytelling episode, going from how do you tell that story? And that's the change that happened or the realization you had.
Yeah. So there you go. Top 3 things to not talk about on a date.
Don't be vulnerable that way.
Yeah. Positive vulnerability. Positive V.
Yeah, I think the vulnerability is so interesting too. I mean, we're going to obviously dive way deep in this episode, but I think what I've learned from a lot of the episodes we've done is vulnerability doesn't need to be, I think this came up a lot on the dating trauma episode with Janice, one of the crowd favorites. It doesn't need to be revealing your deep, dark secrets to be vulnerable. It can just be at the end of the day being like, hey, I had a really good time. Like, it doesn't have to be something like prolific. It just needs to be something that like is putting yourself out there a little.
And also, vulnerability could just mean admitting to not knowing something. That's vulnerable. If someone's talking about their job in an industry you have no idea about, instead of pretending that you're nodding along, you know what they're saying, just be vulnerable in the moment and say, actually, I have no idea what you do.
Right.
And I don't know anything about this industry. Would you mind just giving me a little bit more information? People love that shit because they love talking about themselves.
Exactly. So quick run up of announcements, and then we'll get into sponsors, and then we'll get into the meat of it. As always, check out Love in the Time of Corona. That's our Facebook group. Follow us on Instagram at Dateable Podcast. And then for the people that really want the good stuff, join the sounding board. dateablepodcast.com/sounding board. We have a killer audio series. We have a new episode coming out, and people have just been saying how much this has been helping them with personal transformation, which is basically the crux of this episode. Like last month, we did all about identifying your blind spots when it comes to dating, which is a huge one. Or when you're in relationships too, this doesn't stop once you've met someone. It amplifies once you've met someone. And yeah, like it's just been, I think what's great about the community is you can do what works for you. You can listen in your privacy of your home, or you can come to the monthly challenge discussion group where they actually like go in. And I think Janice mentioned actually on her episode, like what group could you go there and straight face talk about all your fears and anxiety? And everyone's like, I get it. I'm here for you. Like, it's amazing.
It's an amazing community, but also you do you. You make the community however you want it to, and you can interact the way you want it to. If you want to be an introvert and not have any of this virtual interaction, you do you. Again, make it yours. But we really love that this is an extension of our podcast. So if you haven't gotten enough of us and our content through these episodes, here's another avenue for you to get even more information.
This is when we can actually become friends, real friends.
With the big F.
Yep,
friends.
big F. But last announcement is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We are almost at 500. That is our short
Yay.
goal. We, of course, want to go way, way higher than 500. We know there's way more of you than 500 out there listening. So please take like 1 second, drop us a 5-star rating. If you are so inclined, even a 1 to 2 sentence review, that always makes us smile when we read those. So thank you in advance.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Z-Man Games, an array of fun games for adults, one of which is called Love Letter. Now, in this card game, your goal is to win the heart of the noble princess who is looking for an ideal partner and confidant to help with her royal duties when she one day assumes the throne. Your goal is to enlist the characters in the castle to deliver your love letter while keeping other players' letters away. It's trickier than it sounds. Powerful cards lead to early gains but make you a target, and rely on weaker cards for too long and your letter may be tossed in the fire. I find it to be a fun and nice 20-minute mental break during the day. This 2 to 6 player card game fits in your pocket so you can take it with you anywhere. Love Letter is appropriate for ages 10 and up and is available for $11.99 through Z-Man Games. You can find it at Target, your local game store, or directly through Z-Man's web store. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We at Dateable are huge fans of therapy, and BetterHelp can match you with your own licensed therapist and connect you in a safe and private online environment. Me, for example, I was able to start communicating with my therapist in less than 48 hours. It was so quick. Now, BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, and it's more affordable than traditional offline counseling. Their licensed professionals specialize in everything from dating trauma, stress, anxiety, trauma with a big T, depression, grief, you name it. They have someone who's an expert in that. We at Dateable wish for all of you to live a happy, healthy life. And that's why as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/dateable. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, spelled HELP.com/DATEABLE.
Cool. So shall we hear it from Brian?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is for the first time in Dateable history. I bring you our most dateable winner, Brian Clark, everyone.
Woo!
Clap it up for
Crowd
him.
goes wild.
I really believe that, the competition was pretty close. I'm not going to lie. The other candidates for Most Dateable were incredible, but you really won our judges because of the V word, vulnerability. You were so vulnerable with your answers, with your experiences, with everything you were saying, and it made what you said have so much depth and people felt connected to you. So we're all curious to know, how does Brian Clark, Mr. 28 years old, living in the suburbs of Maryland, he's been there for 8 months, originally from La Plata? Is that how you say it?
La Plata. No one can ever say that right. Yeah. No one says it right.
I like La Plata better. Okay.
Yeah. We could just call it La
Plata.
Plata.
Or Lap Plata.
Lapida.
Yeah, lap. Sounds like a strip club.
Lap.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
La Plata. The La Plata at La Plata, Maryland. Anyway, no, he does not work there, but he is originally from there. He's pretty single. He's been taking a dating sabbatical. How does Mr. Brian Clark become so vulnerable and be the vulnerable person that he is today? Let's start there. Take us back to before you became vulnerable. What was pre-V Brian Clark like?
All right. Well, we're starting off strong.
We're
See.
going there.
We're just going right into it.
Yeah. I feel like this is an exam almost. So it's been a journey. The person who I am today is definitely quite different from who I was even 2-3 years ago. It was very quiet growing up. So I was very much that closeted gay kid in middle school. I was also that kid who also didn't really have any friends. So I was always afraid of connection because of also bullying I experienced when I was in middle school. So a lot of that set the stage for this very reserved, very held back, very don't really trust people kind of personality that I carried into high school and also into college, and definitely for part of my early 20s as well. The journey with vulnerability was sort of a lagging for a while. For most of my early 20s, I was very much on the dating apps, going on multiple dates. I was very into hookup culture for quite some time as well. But I would say my growth with vulnerability didn't really progress for a certain amount of years. It would take sort of a series of other events to happen. One of those being starting grad school, and all these events that began in grad school for me to kind of be pushed to this place where I was sort of at a low point in life. And I do think to this day that it is those low points that kind of really force us to kind of look in the mirror and really challenge that identity we hold.
So what were some of these things that happened in grad school?
Yeah.
I'm dying to know.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So most people probably don't know, I was in grad school for clinical psychology. So I wanted to become a psychologist at the time. And anyone who's been to grad school knows that it is a lot. Specifically, a PhD is a lot. And the first year I made it through, but the problem was that a lot of things sort of happened in my second year, which is the hardest year for that program. I had one of my closest friends at the time abruptly kind of cut me out of his life. The short version is we were out drinking one night, which we were always doing at that time. He basically had told me that, I don't want you in my life anymore over something that occurred at the bar while we were both drunk. And after that, I had to sort of come to terms with this really emotionally traumatizing experience of losing a friend and not knowing why. So having been in therapy, I'm able to kind of look back on this with a little more objectivity and realize that my low self-worth, which is actually one of my core beliefs, I have a core belief I've learned that I unconsciously feel that who I am at my core is not good enough. So that could be not good enough for relationships, not good enough for love, not good enough for someone to like me for me, not good enough for someone to want to be around me for just me. And so I do think that because of what happened with my friend, it was as if my core belief had basically just said, ha, grabbing it in the air and said, you see this? Here's the evidence. This is why you're not good enough. This is the most evidence I've ever had in like years. And here it is. And it was like, basically that was being held over my head that entire time. So consciously, I guess, wanted to disprove this. Even if I wasn't conscious of it, I wanted to disprove the fact that no, I am worthy. I am lovable. I can I can find it, This guy I'm referring to is the strongest connection I've ever had with a guy. I haven't had many relationships, but at the time he was the strongest, and I felt that I can love him and he can love me, then it's almost as if I'm proving that I am worthy. When I made the decision to go back with my ex, I was very certain that we're probably meant to be together. Like, this is the person for me. This is a person I've had such a solid relationship with. He gets my humor, and most people are like scared of my humor. So like, that's like a huge deal for a guy to get my humor. And yeah, it wasn't the right place to start at for a relationship.
I think what's really unique about your story is you had a series of relationships that weren't necessarily romantic. Some were romantic, some weren't, that got you to a point where you thought, I need therapy because I'm not expressing myself to the fullest. And for some reason, conflict is hard for you. And also the grieving process of losing a friend or losing a partner. So you wanted a system to process all of this. But at 20-some years old, how did you know to seek therapy? How did you even learn about therapy?
Yeah, so being a student in clinical psych, you learn a lot. So I actually was a therapist for a year as a trainee. But in terms of sort of what brought me to therapy, so going back to the second year, all of this is transpiring. I'm getting back with my ex, and a lot of things just start happening. So anyone who's gone back with an ex knows that the same issues come up again.
Yep.
Always.
They did not go
Definitely
away, actually. And that those issues with this ex specifically were around communication on the surface. I want to preface by saying my ex is a really great guy. In case anyone's, thinking like, oh, what a dick. And like, no, like he's actually like a really great guy.
Totally.
I don't think anybody's thinking he's a dick.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're still, fine. There's no ill anything between us today. But he wasn't really raised to communicate emotions or really kind of see that growing up. Not to say I'm necessarily, a genius at this either, but this created this very unhealthy back and forth with issues around me expressing my needs and him not understanding what I'm saying, or kind of unintentionally gaslighting every now and then. That culminated all of this in this breakup. And when we were going through the breakup, I was at probably the lowest point at this point because I was experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression because of grad school. And I was seeking support. And he basically informed me that he was not going to give me that support. And it was interesting. It was almost as if like it was kind of like I stepped out of my body and like I just smacked myself and just looked at myself and said, Brian, what are you doing? It was one of those moments. And after that breakup, I was just at such a low point that I couldn't pick myself up emotionally. It was as if you threw a glass sheet and it just shattered on the floor, is the kind of the best way I can put it. It was one of those low points that we experience in life that is like, I can't do this. I need therapy. I need someone to help me.
Okay, so just backing up a little is that all this stuff is happening and you knew about therapy because you're in school. Was this the first time you sought out therapy for yourself?
That's a good question. This was the first time I sought out therapy. So I had sort of like wanted to seek therapy for a couple years now, but there were always sort of things getting in the way. So career, job, working long hours, wanting to do other things on the weekend, hang out with friends. There were always these things in the way. So I didn't really have that push I needed. And I think a lot of people who are in therapy now kind of know what I'm talking about. There's sort of this thing that happens that sort of, it's either a mental shift or a life shift, or something happens where you're like, okay, no, like I'm ready for therapy and I'm going to do it. And for me, it really was this series of events of losing my close friend, everything that happened with grad school, and my ex all in the same year just kind of brought me to this place where, to be frank, I just couldn't get up on my own emotionally anymore. Like there was no other choice. I had to seek therapy because I couldn't even wing it anymore because my confidence had been pretty much destroyed. I don't want to be too dramatic, but like at that point, my confidence was pretty much gone. Everything I knew about where I was going in life, I had wanted to be a psychologist for probably like 7 years at that point. I'd been pursuing psychology. So my whole career plan was gone as well. So this thing that I had defined myself for so long, which was getting into this program, becoming a psychologist, was also gone.
With therapy, I guess let's start with, what were some of the surprises that you found in therapy? Even though you've been in this space, maybe there's just something like in those first initial few sessions, you're like, I didn't really think that I would get this out of therapy.
So when I first started therapy, I was very optimistic because I was so ready for change. I was so ready for this process. And it wasn't as smooth as I would have thought. There was this point about 2 months in where I had looked at my therapist, who's a woman in her 60s. I basically told her, I feel kind of frustrated because I feel like you're not giving me answers. And I kind of want you to give me answers, And I also don't feel like I'm making a lot of progress, And she kind of looked at me and goes, yeah, I'm not here to give you answers. I'm here to guide you. You're the one who decides where we go.
I think that's such an important point, I guess, for us to highlight, because I think people think of therapy as like going to a tarot card reading or like a psychic. Give me the answers. What am I supposed to do? But therapy is there to guide you. So how were you able to make that shift from, okay, she's not here to give me answers, she's really here to guide me?
Not very easily. I think I was a little annoyed by that answer. I was like, why am I paying you then? We kept going though, because I was at a place where I was very invested in therapy. So I was willing to take what she said to heart. And so it was sort of this mental shift of like, what I would realize later is taking back my power. I'd say about December. So I started therapy in September. And I'd say in December is when I started to sort of get more of the aha moments that started. So it took a good couple months, which is something I think people really should kind of sit with, is this kind of stuff takes time.
Totally.
And you do have to be patient. This isn't something that's sort of like you just flick on a light and, oh, like now I get it and I can start dating. Like it takes time. And so in January and December, this theme of like giving away my power emerged. And I realized that I had actually been giving away power in many situations in life without even realizing it. With dating, with career, with friends. And this sort of led into this greater sphere of really bringing it back to me. So like one of the big things I'm focusing on now is this very simple question, but it's very hard to answer. And that is, what do I need?
Wait, so what are some of the ways that you were feeling that? Like that you uncovered about yourself with dating and friends and career, all that stuff?
Yeah. It's hard to put into words because there's so many sessions merging together in my head. But basically, instead of taking accountability for dating and relationships and who I'm choosing, I was sort of always putting it on other people without realizing it. Like, for instance, with my ex, I can't believe he said that to me. I can't believe he wouldn't support me. Can you believe he wouldn't support me? And my therapist, kind of was like, why weren't you supporting yourself? And at the time, that came off very harsh at the time.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that totally makes sense. There was actually even this post in the Facebook group today about like, why are all men that I'm dating emotionally unavailable? And it actually made me think about like the episode we did with Connor Beaton too, when he totally turned some of the conversation around on me even and was like, how are you showing up that's emotionally available? And that's what you need to focus on, not why all these other people aren't emotionally available. And it's kind of a similar thing. It's like putting the emphasis back on you.
That was a great episode, by the way. Really good. I loved that scene.
Yes.
I was like, wow. Yeah.
Connor.
But it was the therapy side of it, it's definitely this like trying to make you see. Cause I think people can only be told, like, until you're ready to see it, until you're ready to do it. I think that was interesting. What you said is like for years you kind of put it off until you made it a priority. And I remember like the similar thing. And I think sometimes it actually takes that big event happening. Actually, a reason why a lot of people go to therapy is because of breakups. Like that's a very common reason to kind of jumpstart it. I know for me, therapy is kind of like dating too. Like you need to find the right fit of the therapist. And that's like why how it makes it really good. Like I've definitely had therapists that I'm like, I'm not feeling the connection, but then I had the therapist here that I was just like, I love, and it totally did the same thing. Like it brought out the stuff in me without her being like, do this and do that. Like you have to kind of pull it out yourself. But I think like the biggest piece was, like I went there for someone else to figure out what happened with that. And then it came out with, okay, this is what's going on for me. Like they turned it around to be about like, what is it for me?
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of my biggest surprises too with therapy is how much of it is turned around on you. Even things you don't think are, even things like you're so sure, oh, he did this, he did that, or the therapist will bring it back to you and be like, well, why are you, why do you keep choosing people who don't have the qualities that you need? It's like, what?
Yeah. Can you give us more examples like that where you are sort of blaming the other people and then your therapist is like, let's bring it back to you?
So one of the patterns my therapist pointed out maybe a few months ago was that I tend to when I am dating a guy or in a relationship, I tend to jump into it without being friends with him first. So there's usually this immediate going into the dating phase without even trying to be his friend or be platonic. And so that sort of developed this homework assignment, which was, how about for now on when you go meet guys or go on a date, you just don't do anything physical. Just see if there is a friend connection. See if you would like this person outside of being attracted to them in some way. And I've been doing that. I've been, although I would say I'm on a dating sabbatical, I have gone on a few, I guess, hangouts / dates in the last few months. And I've been applying that mindset of when I meet this guy, I'm actually not going to do anything with him. I'm just going to talk to him and then I'm going to leave. And then I'm going to process it.
So, okay, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like I relate very hard to this like back with an ex situation because I've been there myself. And I think it took me a long time to like realize what was kind of under the hood there. Like I think there was a side that I just did genuinely love this person and wanted to make it work for sure. But then the other side was I think I had a subconscious belief that like no one else would understand me the way he did, or like I wouldn't find someone else. Or did you experience any of those revelations?
So I would say yes. Mine was slightly different in that a lot of this is tied to my self-worth. So really, if I hadn't said this before, my biggest revelation is realizing that I have low self-worth. Ever since I realized that, I feel like I have so much more power in my decisions, and when it comes to controlling my thoughts, when it comes to controlling my feelings, behaviors, understanding where things come from. The fact that I can understand that so much of how I think and feel when it comes to negative things comes from self-worth, this unconscious belief, is just, it's transformative. So I wanted to say that first. But back to your point, one of the first ways that I realized I could get people to like me is through comedy. And because of that, I have clinged to sort of this persona of making people laugh as a way to connect, as a way to like me. Oh, like if someone's laughing at you, or they can't not like you. And so that sort of created this very strong, I need to make people laugh desire that's linked to my self-worth. And with my ex, he got my humor so well, and he would always laugh at my jokes. I felt a very strong connection with that. I would say I put a lot of power into the humor aspect, and this sort of superficial, if you will, qualities that we often have with relationships, that I didn't realize just how inauthentic and how not compatible we really were until months after the breakup the second time. And so while it is a little, I relate a lot to what you said, Julie. I do feel that when I was in at the time, I did feel that if I can't make this work, then I'm just not lovable. But I also realized afterwards, I actually wasn't bringing my best self to this either. I was actually being inauthentic too, without even realizing it.
Right.
And how are you taking these learnings to dating? Even though you said you're on a dating sabbatical, but when you are actively dating, how does this Brian post-therapy or still in therapy show up?
2.0, Brian 2.0.
Or Mr.
Maybe like 1.5, yeah.
Or Most Dateable. How does the Most Dateable Brian show up for dating?
I would say it's still sort of being developed. Like I said, I started therapy in September, and I'm still very much in it. And while I'm having these revelations, I'm still very much not complete. I can kind of see the shadow of the person I want to be in this long tunnel, but I don't necessarily know what he's going to look like, this actualized person that I really want to be, because I'm not there yet. I'd say right now, showing up for me really means putting Brian first. And that's a very sort of deep question for me still, because I'm still grappling with this larger question is, what is that I need? Because being able to answer what I need involves listening to my thoughts, feelings, and also this other element, which I've been having more trouble with, which is listening to my body, because I've disconnected from my body ever since I was a teenager and I realized I was gay. There's been this cognitive disconnect from my body, whereas what my body feels is unimportant. Doesn't matter, because that'll get in the way. And at the time, disconnecting my body was a survival technique so that I would, get by and pass in school. But that carried into adulthood. Pretty much up until recently, I ignored whatever it is my body told me, whether it's being uncomfortable, whether it's being anxious, whether it's being tired.
Right.
To sort of get through life in a rather inauthentic way. And so I think that currently is one of my biggest hurdles, is been listening, being able to reconnect with my body so that I can answer this question of what is it I need right now.
I feel like that's been like the theme of season 12 on this podcast, because I totally get it. Like, I feel like I've always lived in my head, and I always try to justify behavior because I want to see the best in people. But sometimes like you're like, no, I just feel anxious, and that's a sign I should be listening to. Like, it doesn't always need to like justify it. And again, they're not like a right or wrong person or a bad or good person for doing that, but sometimes it's just not compatible. And I think sometimes like when you feel it in your body, like when you're feeling like this stomach pit, like that's a sign. And I think we need to start listening to that stuff more.
Yes. Oh, so much power in what you said, Julie. I'm just immediately thinking of so much of my 20s where I was a quote unquote social drinker, which was basically me getting shit faced every weekend.
Yes, and getting numb, and numbing all those
100% relate to that.
Numbing so much. Yes, numbing so much of that pain, but it's that behavior is so culturally accepted that we don't even question it. At that age. And it's only now that I'm able to look back on it and be like, wow, I required to be drunk or pretty much blacked out in order just to hook up with a guy, even just to share an intimate sexual experience and some dates, to be frank. It's like,
Yes.
and at the time I saw nothing wrong with that.
Oh my God, I could so relate. I used to get way too drunk on dates, and my old roommate was like, dude, this is not okay. Like, you need to take it down a notch. And I think, honestly, at least for me, it took that time when I was in therapy and when I went through that like intense heartbreak that I didn't really want to go out and party and stuff. I mean, I did fall into like a bit of a depression in that time. And I was for once in my life, I was at one with my feelings though, in my own company. Like, I know, did yours like, when you were kind of going through this, was it primarily over COVID or was it before COVID that you were kind of having these revelations of therapy?
This was all over
Okay.
COVID, yeah. So it started September, and then Revelation started in December.
Got it. So you were kind of like slowed down pace of life by default almost then in COVID times. Like, was this the first time that you felt like you weren't turning to like drinking and friends and whatever other distractions that were out there?
I can already hear my therapist if she could hear this. Oh,
What would she say?
she would be like, "Your problem is," she would never say your problem. This is just how I hear her talk. She would say, "Your problem is that you are uncomfortable with not moving."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard one to grasp because especially in city environments, we're so used to just constantly go, go, go. I got this appointment. I got this job. I got to drink Starbucks. I got to get dinner. I got to get the kids. Forgot the kids. Got to go get the kids again. Like, it's just this constant everyday lifestyle. And so, like you said, Julie, I was at a point where I'm living at home now with my parents. I was also unemployed at the time. My career was gone. Everything. If there was a rock bottom, I had hit the basement below that. So, like,
you're like, I'm 5 stories below rock bottom.
Literally, in my parents' basement. And so like nothing had gone as planned, and I was grappling with that. And my therapist was basically just like, we need to work on you being okay with not moving because you're putting all of these external pressures on you. So for instance, my career, not having my own place, this kind of thing, living with my parents, but you're not here. You're in the future, you're in the past, you're giving power, again, with the power, you're giving power to other things instead of just having the power here. And it was a process. It was a process to slowly come to the point I'm at now, which is, let me just kind of be here.
Let's take a break from this really insightful conversation with Brian and hear a quick message.
Well, it's like we go through so many feelings and emotions in a day, but we have so many tools now for distraction that we only feel like 2 or 3 of the feelings throughout a day when we probably felt 100 different things. And I think something therapy has opened up for me is when I am uncomfortable or when I get into that situation where I'm feeling uneasy, feel the feeling instead of trying to find something to distract me, like a drink or watching TV or scrolling through the internet, because we do that so much on dates. I have asked people, can you do a sober first date? We've asked that, right? This is why we have the hashtag sober first kiss, because I really feel like chemistry can be determined when both people are sober. And people would say, well, what else am I going to do on a date?
Right.
We can't just sit there and not do something. My hands got to be touching something. I got to be drinking something. We just can't sit with our feelings anymore. And therapy forces you to do that. It's super uncomfortable, but at least you recognize the different feelings that you're getting throughout the day.
And that's why COVID's been so damn uncomfortable for a lot of people, is because like I remember, I mean, like I did this consciously because I was in a low point in my life, but like I feel like a lot of people just got thrown into this through COVID, not necessarily like seeking out being at one with their feelings. Like I just remember going out like every night of the week at one point in my life to just distract myself. And I think people do that with dates all the time. Like maybe this is a good segue to some takeaways, but I think like this whole like, distraction piece and like what is the root of what you're actually doing. Like I think so many times we think we need to just fill the funnel. We need to go on date after date. We need to do X and Y activity to meet people. But a lot of times when we really become dateable is when we get at one with our feelings. And it's the stuff that like you don't think about. Like you think about like, how do I hack the dating app or like fix my profile? But that stuff really actually is, at least in my opinion, in, not the stuff that really matters. Like, it's when you get raw and real, and like sometimes that takes time. Like you're saying, it's a process. It's not going to happen in like a weekend retreat. Like, this is like an ongoing process.
Right.
And I think sometimes you have to be alone. Like, you're taking a dating sabbatical. Sometimes you need an alone time to start processing it, and then you can like slowly emerge back out once you've kind of had that opportunity to process more.
And to your point about the dating sabbatical, I had been on apps pretty much all of my 20s in some way or another. Tinder, Hinge, you name it. And so when I finally took all the apps off my phone, as in I deleted them off my phone, I didn't put them in a little folder.
Right.
I deleted them off my phone, delete button. It was very uncomfortable because I no longer had this outlet where I could go and seek what I thought was potential matches. But in reality, being on the app was probably the biggest barrier to all of this stuff I'm discussing right now. Because, like I said, I have the low self-worth core belief. And when I'm on an app, it's basically like a buffet for my low self-worth. And because people don't respond for whatever reason, people ghost, people unmatch, people don't swipe right on you, people don't super like, people don't. There's just all of these constant everything for a low self-worth core belief to just be grabbing at, being like, see right here. Like, someone wouldn't respond. Oh, like, God, like, why do I feel so shitty right now? I would feel shitty all the time, but I wouldn't understand why. I'd be like, this guy, screw him, like, whatever. Now I know it's because it was just constant food for my core belief. And so when I took all the apps off, it was finally, there was suddenly no more evidence for my core beliefs to grab onto. And there was this quiet.
And then when you go back, like, eventually, now you have the skill set to be like, okay, this person's not responding. They could be like not even active on this app. Like, they could have a significant other. Like, you don't necessarily turn to it's all about me. And I think I always say this to people. It's like, if you're in a low point, like, especially like getting over a breakup, like, people think like, I'm just going to download the app and I'll be okay. And like, you need a thick skin when you're dating this day and age. Like, it's not a walk in the park. And if you're already in a bad place, like, I remember doing the same when I was going through this period. Like, I'm like, this was the first time I was truly single in my entire life. Like, no one in the picture. And I think it's like, I couldn't handle it. Like, I was already at such a low that like, I couldn't have that additional lows that came with dating. So I think like, really, like, to date, you need to be in a good place mentally. Like, that is such an important piece of dating.
Yeah. The biggest thing I'd say from a takeaway from therapy I've had is that my therapist said this the other day, how she said, the relationship is only as strong as its weakest link. That's really helped me kind of frame relationships now, in understanding that if I'm not able to bring my best complete self, it'll be sort of kind of like a bridge with sort of like, I don't know, a rotting pillar or something that's kind of weak and like would fall over if a big gust of wind like pushes it too hard. If I don't have my career in order, how am I bringing that into the dating? If I'm unhappy with the career I have and I hate my job, I'm unconsciously bringing that into the relationship. If my main thing is like, I need to party and I need to drink every weekend, well, why is that? Why is that my main coping mechanism? Not to say like, all drinkers is coping, but like in this specific scenario. So there's all these like questions I have now about how do I make myself more complete so that when I do go into dating, my pillar is strong?
Absolutely. My biggest takeaway from this conversation is you said something earlier, Brian. You said, I learned from therapy to put myself first. And I wanted to pause there because I think some people could misunderstand this statement. Putting yourself first is different than being selfish. Putting yourself first means whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment, ask yourself how you're feeling first before you try to guess what the other person's doing, what they're thinking, guess why they can't like you back, why they can't change their behavior. We have to start with our own actions and our own thoughts first. And so it's something we always see in dating, especially when I was doing dating coaching, very similar to therapy, is that people come in seeking answers about someone I've never met, not my client. But they want to know, why isn't she texting me back? Why doesn't he like me? Why did this breakup happen? Well, I'm sorry. I don't know this other person.
Mhm.
I'm not psychic. I cannot tell you. But how can you show up better for this relationship? And how can you be a better dater? That's putting yourself first. That's what that means. So I really love that you brought that up.
I was going to have that as my other takeaway too, because I think it's so important. And I think it's something I've struggled with for years. Like, I think some of it does come from like the low self-worth too, that you're like, oh, this person likes me, you know, like I'm going to now adapt to like fit in with them and like I think I was the cool girl for so many years that I was adaptable and, you know, and I'm not saying being adaptable is a bad quality, but when you're like self-sacrificing your own needs, it is problematic. Or I'd be afraid to share my needs because I didn't want to like rock the boat and like make this person like upset and want to leave and think I'm not the cool person for them. And I think like there is this selfish feeling about being like my needs come first, but at the end of the day, like they do come first. And like I love what your therapist said, like instead of blaming these other people, it's like finding people that meet your needs. Like we always say that, you know, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are single is because they're chasing people that aren't available. Yeah.
The wrong people.
And it's like you're not asking for too much. You're just asking it from the wrong person. And I'm saying that as someone that's been there before. So not talking down to anyone. Definitely have wasted many years. I shouldn't say wasted. Learned from many years of, you know, like trying to like make someone something that they weren't, right?
Right. I mean, we always ask that too. Julie and I are always like, first of all, do you like this person? Because, you know, we always hear like, how do I get this person to like me back? Do they like me? Well, first and foremost, do you actually like this person?
So I just want to catch Yue on that real quick. So that was my revelation last week, Yue, of this question of I had been telling my therapist because there was this guy I went out with. And basically, short story is he didn't message me back after the date, after I had messaged him. I was left on red. And so, of course, all the feelings start, all the thoughts start. And then, I was like, wait, stop, let's pause. Why am I so worried about what he thinks?
Right.
What about what I want? Wait a second. I keep asking myself, what does he want? Oh, does he want to be friends? Does he want to hook up? Does he interested in me romantically? Wait. I don't even know what I want from this guy. I can't even answer that question. So why am I so... Because you should have seen my therapist. She was just like, I've been waiting for this for so long.
Yeah, it's like those moments too when all the work comes to full stop. But that's really important that you took that second. Or it's like, how does this person make me feel? Like, what am I looking for? I'm looking for someone that makes me feel secure and loved and happy, and them leaving you on red is none of the above, right? So it's like, why chase them?
It's it's so liberating to come to that revelation, because you're like, actually, this is not what I want.
Thank you. You just showed me. Great. Move on. Find that person that is.
Yes. And I thought I was so oh yeah, I got dating and like I know what I'm doing. Look at me communicating. I want to know what the guy thinks. I'm so direct. I was like praising myself for this behavior. And then the whole time, and then there was this moment like, why am I so concerned? And that moment, I will say, ever since then, my confidence has started to come back. And my confidence has been gone for most of this year, almost a year now, since all this started with my breakup, with school. This is the first time this past week or two that I felt my confidence slowly come back into me. And that has been the most amazing feeling. And it started with this switch of just saying, what about what I want?
Love it.
And this is exactly why you are most dateable. This is why. I think people think, like, oh, being most dateable must mean you get most dates or you're the most wanted. And I want people to just stop right there, because it's not a popularity contest. Being most dateable means you have enough self-awareness, that you're humble, and that you're constantly evolving as a person. So you're constantly learning about yourself and other people. What makes you dateable is your vulnerability and your openness to change, and not being stuck on these rules or this school of thought or the old Brian or the new Brian. You're not tied to these outcomes. Your mission is to become the best version of yourself. And that's what makes you most dateable.
And find someone that also loves that version, right? And puts your needs first, right? That's the goal at the end of the day.
It is a goal. You both are so sweet, and I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you and how much I love Dateable and how happy I am to be on here. You both are amazing. And there's one thing I did want to say as well before we end, and that is, anyone listening right now, if you're at a point where you're thinking about therapy, but you're unsure, or you've wanted therapy for a while, but you're not, you just feel like you kind of need that extra push. Because I remember when I was in that space of uncertainty and I wanted someone to tell me it's okay. If you want that sign, here it is. It's okay. Go to therapy. It can only make you a better, more actualized person. It is okay to go to therapy.
I love that. I'm so happy you said that too, because therapy has made strides over the years, but there is still stigma for a lot of people that don't have this as present. And I think Yue and I are clearly pro-therapy believers, because we've also heard for over 5 years when we've been doing this podcast, the people that have shown the most evolution, a lot of times therapy was a major reason for that change. So, we both experienced it firsthand within ourselves also. So totally agree with you. But I think just hearing your story and hearing other people be I came out from a low to a confidence, and also just having the confidence to know that you might hit that low again, but you'll work your way up. That's part of life and the evolution. It's not, like I said, it's not a weekend retreat. It's kind of a forever thing that you're going through.
Yeah. Let's get really intimate right here, because for anybody who's made it to the end of this episode, it means that you must believe in therapy to some respect, and you are curious about it. But the people who truly need therapy probably did not even play this episode. I bet you anything, because they don't think it's relevant for them. So being the good friend that you are, if you're listening right now and you have a friend who's more concerned about getting more dates or getting more matches, send them this episode, because what they're looking for is a superficial change that is setting them up for failure. What they're building is a weak house with pretty paint, and that paint eventually will chip off. But when you have a good foundation, which is what you get in therapy, then you're able to house the people in your space who are also strong and who also want to be along for the ride. So if you want to be a good friend, send them this episode and say, you know what? I really think you could benefit from listening to this.
Wow, I love that analogy, Yue. That was great.
That was therapist in training right here. That was great.
I'm studying for my exam right now. I'm just kidding. Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for being vulnerable. And I guess we never really talked about this word when you've demonstrated vulnerability this entire time. Vulnerability to me is just having the courage to state your needs and state your feelings. That's what it is. It's a very courageous thing to do. So, Brian, you've demonstrated that without actually saying the word, I'm being vulnerable.
Hey, that's the best thing. You're not I'm funny. You just are funny, right? So show us your V card without showing us your V card, Brian.
Yeah, that'll be my dating profile headliner. Come see my V card. Yeah.
Yeah, come take my V card. And for all of our listeners, please, we love getting guests who are vulnerable and self-aware like Brian. And we only get these guests because we have great reviews in Apple Podcasts. So if you could do the same, if you haven't done that yet, give us a 5-star review with a little something nice about us. And this will be our currency to go out there and find better guests who are bringing the content that you love and are life-changing. So thank you for doing that if you haven't done that already. And thank you again, Brian. We will wrap this up in true Dateable fashion. Stay dateable. Oh, most dateable. The Dateable Podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. Want to continue the conversation? First, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter with the handle @Dateable Podcast. Tag us in any post with the hashtag #StayDateable, and trust us, we look at all of those posts. Then head over to our website, dateablepodcast.com. There you'll find all the episodes as well as articles, videos, and our coaching service with vetted industry experts. You can also find our premium Why series, where we dissect, analyze, and offer solutions to some of the most common dating conundrums. We're also downloadable for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Overcast, Stitcher Radio, and other podcast platforms. Your feedback is valuable to us, so don't forget to leave us a review. And most importantly, remember to stay dateable.